Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Influential People in World History, Poetic Tour Part 4. Enrico Fermi. Enrico Fermi was an Italian and American physicist and the creator of the world's first nuclear reactor, the Chicago Pile 1. He has been called the architect of the nuclear age and the architect of the atomic bomb. He received the 1938 Nobel Prize in Physics for his work in induced radioactivity by neutron bombardment and for the discovery of transuranium elements. In 1938, Fermi left Italy and moved to the United States, where he worked on the Manhattan Project during World War II. After the war, Fermi served under Robert Oppenheimer on the General Advisory Committee, which advised the Atomic Energy Commission on nuclear matters. Fermi said, "What we all fervently hope is that man will soon grow sufficiently adult to make good use of the powers he acquires over nature." What an inspiring man was Enrico Fermi. For the human race, how hard he did labor. Leonhard Euler. Leonhard Euler was a Swiss mathematician, physicist, astronomer, geographer, logician, and engineer who made many discoveries in the field of mathematics. He spent most of his adult life in St. Petersburg, Russia, and in Berlin, then the capital of Prussia. Leonhard Euler lived from 1707 to 1783. He is credited with popularizing the Greek letter pi to denote the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. In 1731, Euler became a professor of physics at the Academy of Sciences in St. Petersburg, Russia. In 1741, he took a post at the Berlin Academy. Leonhard Euler was a religious man throughout his life. He was a devout Christian who believed the Bible to be inspired. In St. Petersburg in 1783, after a lunch with his family, Euler was discussing the newly discovered planet Uranus when he collapsed and died from a brain hemorrhage. What an inspiring life Leonhard Euler had. In the field of mathematics, he certainly had a lot of leverage. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a Swiss and French philosopher, writer, and composer. His political philosophy influenced the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. He lived from 1712 to 1778. As a boy, his favorite book was Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. In 1742, he moved to Paris, France. He became friends with Denis Diderot, a French philosopher. Rousseau's famous books include Discourses on Inequality, The Social Contract, Julie or the New Helois, and Emile or On Education. His ideas were the result of an almost obsessive dialogue with writers of the past. In The Social Contract, Rousseau wrote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. Those who think themselves the masters of others are indeed greater slaves than they." In Emile, Rousseau wrote, "The noblest work in education is to make a reasoning man, and we expect to train a young child by making him reason." Rousseau influenced Thomas Jefferson when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. What an amazing man Jean-Jacques Rousseau was. He encouraged people to pursue transcendence. Niccolò Machiavelli. Niccolò Machiavelli was an Italian diplomat, author, philosopher, and historian who lived during the Renaissance. He is best known for his political treatise, The Prince. Machiavelli lived from 1469 to 1527. He has often been called the father of modern political philosophy and political science. His home was in Florence, Italy. In The Prince, he wrote that his reading of history showed him that politics have always been plagued with deception, treachery, and crime. Some quotes by Machiavelli. "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. There is no other way to guard yourself against flattery than by making men understand that telling you the truth will not offend you. Never was anything great achieved without danger. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. Well, Niccolò Machiavelli was a realistic politician, and we do need to face the reality of this world and what is here." Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was an English economist, cleric, and scholar, influential in the fields of political economy and demography. He lived from 1766 to 1834. Malthus wrote a 1798 book called An Essay on the Principle of Population. He believed that human population tended to increase, leading to war, famine, and disease. This is called the Malthusian catastrophe. His views were influential and controversial. Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Story by Charles Dickens represents the perceived ideas of Malthus, famously illustrated by his explanation as to why he refuses to donate to the poor and destitute. If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. In the musical Urinetown, written by Greg Cotis and Mark Holman, the characters live in a society in which a fee must be paid in order to urinate, for a drought has made water incredibly scarce. A revolution starts with a pee for free agenda. The penultimate line is Hail Malthus. In the film Avengers: Infinity War, the main villain, called Thanos, appears to be motivated by Malthusian views about population growth and commits universal mass genocide known as the Blip. Well, Thomas Malthus' ideas are certainly distressing. Maybe a detailed examination of them we should skip. John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was the 35th U.S. president elected in 1960 and served in office from 1961 to 1963. He served at the height of the Cold War, and the majority of his foreign policy concerned relations with the Soviet Union and Cuba. John F. Kennedy was born into the prominent Kennedy family in Brookline, Massachusetts. During the Second World War, Kennedy served in the U.S. Navy and became a hero in the Pacific, commanding a motor torpedo boat PT-109. In 1960, JFK and Richard Nixon participated in the first televised presidential debates in American history. He became the first Roman Catholic Christian U.S. president. Some quotes by John F. Kennedy. If more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I am convinced the world would be a little better place in which to live. I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered, not for victories or defeats in battles or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit. I look forward to an America which will not be afraid of grace and beauty, an America which will reward achievement in the arts as well as we regard achievement in business or statecraft. This country cannot afford to be materially rich and spiritually poor. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. What an inspiring life John F. Kennedy lived for the United States and all of humanity. Gregory Pincus. Gregory Pincus was an American biologist and researcher who co-invented the combined oral contraception pill. Pincus was born in Woodbine, New Jersey, USA. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Russia and Latvia. He graduated from Cornell University with a degree in biology and became a physiology instructor at Harvard University. Dr. Pincus studied hormonal biology and steroidal hormones early in his career. Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood funded his research in developing a birth control pill. In 1960, the FDA approved Enovid, also known as the pill. The birth control pill changed family life. It allowed women to plan when they would have children. It also led to the decline of fertility in women and reduction in population. The issue is controversial because the Roman Catholic Christian Church opposes contraception. Mani. Mani was an Iranian prophet and the founder of Manichaeism, a religion most prevalent in late antiquity. He lived from 216 to 274 A.D. Mani was born near what is now Baghdad, Iraq, in Mesopotamia, at the time of the Parthian Empire. Mani traveled to India, where he studied Hinduism and Buddhism. He returned in 242 and presented himself to Shapur I, the second Sasanian king of kings of Iran. Shapur I took him into his court. Mani is said to have performed miracles including levitation, teleporting, and healing, and also was famed as a painter. Bahram I, the fourth Sasanian king of kings, imprisoned Mani, who died in prison within a month. Mani's teaching included the eternal struggle between good and evil. It was believed that Manichaeism completely disappeared, but there is evidence that it persists in China, especially in Fujian. Mani said, "Continually strive to push yourself forward, and God will not turn you away. Be zealous for God. You shall live without suffering from the pain of past sins. You shall receive comfort and peace. My brothers, do not slack off in doing good by day and by night. Let us today do good so that our way may be radiant once again, and we may be fearless wherever we may go." What a wonderful life Mani lived. His wisdom is still relevant even though he lived long ago. Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin was the leader of the Russian Revolution and first dictator of the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1924. He lived from 1870 to 1924. Lenin helped Russia to become the first communist country in the world. Lenin was born in an upper-middle-class family in Simbirsk, Russia. His brother Alexander was executed in 1887 for revolutionary activity against the Tsar. In 1897, Lenin was arrested for sedition and exiled to Siberia for 3 years. After his exile, he moved to Western Europe. In 1917, after the Tsar was ousted, Lenin returned to Russia and helped the Bolsheviks take power. Lenin established a totalitarian dictatorship, which oversaw mass killings and political repression. Lenin fully supported the communist ideology of Karl Marx. The communist philosophy is dedicated to the common man and improving the lives of the poor. In reality, all are enslaved and poor except for the communist elite, who enjoy wealth and total power. Lenin's policies led to famine in 1921, in which 5 million Russians starved to death. Vladimir Lenin was one of the most evil men in history, although communists today continue to praise him till their very last breath. Emperor Wen of Sui. Emperor Wen of Sui was the founder and the first emperor of the Chinese Sui dynasty. He lived from 541 to 604 AD. Emperor Wen of Sui withdrew favor from the Confucians and encouraged the spread of Buddhism in China. He is regarded as one of the most important emperors in Chinese history, reunifying China proper in 589 after centuries of division. During his reign, the construction of the Grand Canal between the Yellow River and the Yangtze River began. Emperor Wen's reign was a great period of prosperity. It was said that there was enough food stored for 50 years. Historian Sima Guang wrote, quote, "Emperor was by nature cautious and solemn. He got up early in the morning to host imperial gatherings. He gave much compensation to the families of soldiers who died in battle. He loved the Chinese people. He lived simply and frugally. When his clothes became worn, he patched them and continued to wear them. Wow, what an amazing man! Among Chinese emperors, Wen of Sui was a real gem." Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama was a Portuguese explorer and the first European to reach India by sea. His initial voyage to India by way of the Good Hope, South Africa, was the first to link Europe and Asia by an ocean route connecting the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This milestone in world history helped Portugal establish an overseas empire and ushered in the age of exploration. Vasco da Gama's voyage arrived in Calicut, India on May 20th, 1498. Unopposed access to Indian spices such as pepper and cinnamon boosted the economy of Portugal. For his contributions to Portugal, Vasco da Gama in 1524 was appointed governor of India with the title of viceroy and was ennobled as Count of Vidigueira in 1519. The Portuguese national epic poem Os Lusíadas was written in his honor by Louis de Camões. He died in Kochi, India in 1524, and his remains were returned to Portugal in 1539. Vasco da Gama is one of the most famous and celebrated explorers in the Age of Discovery. Named after him is the crater Vasco da Gama on the moon. What an amazing man was Vasco da Gama. For him, let us sing a song. Let us belt out a tune. Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, the first Persian empire, in what is now the country of Iran. He lived from 600 BC to 530 BC. From the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River in India, the empire created by Cyrus was the largest the world had ever seen. Cyrus was well known for respecting the customs and religions of the lands he conquered. His edict of restoration encouraged the return of the Israelites to the land of Israel. This ended the Jewish Babylonian captivity and is described in the book of Isaiah and the Old Testament in the Bible. Although not Jewish, he is revered by the Jewish people for ending their slavery. Cyrus is recognized for his achievements in human rights, politics, and military strategy. He remains a cult figure among modern Iranians, with his tomb serving as a spot of reverence for millions of people. The tomb of Cyrus in Pasargadae, Iran, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. What a wonderful life Cyrus the Great lived. His legacy is beautiful, luminous, and bright. Peter the Great. Peter the Great was the Tsar of Russia from 1682 to 1721. He modernized Russia, transforming the country into a major European power. Through a number of successful wars, he captured ports at Azov on the Don River, near the Sea of Azov by the Black Sea, and the Baltic Sea, laying the groundwork for the Imperial Russian Navy and ending Swedish supremacy in the Baltic Sea. He led a cultural revolution that replaced traditional and medieval practices with ones that were modern, scientific, westernized, and based on the Enlightenment. In 1703, he created the first Russian newspaper and founded the city of St. Petersburg on the Neva River with access to the Baltic Sea as a window to the west. Peter moved the capital of Russia from Moscow to St. Petersburg in 1712. The Bronze Horseman is an equestrian statue of Peter the Great in the Senate Square in St. Petersburg. It was commissioned by Catherine the Great and installed in 1782. What a life Peter the Great lived! When it came to fulfilling his life's destiny, he really came through. Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was the founder of the People's Republic of China and dictator of China from 1949 to 1976. He was the leader who helped China become a communist country. During the Chinese Civil War, Mao Zedong led communist forces in defeating the Kuomintang led by Chiang Kai-shek. In 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward that aimed to rapidly transform China's economy from agrarian to industrial, which led to the deadliest famine in history and the deaths of 15 to 55 million Chinese people between 1958 and 1962. Mao's policies were responsible for vast numbers of deaths, with estimates ranging from 40 to 80 million victims due to starvation, persecution, prison labor, and mass executions, and his government was characterized as totalitarian, in other words, total control over the lives of the Chinese people. During his time of leadership, China was very involved in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. A strong case can be made that Mao Zedong was the most evil man in history. The fact that he still has admirers today certainly seems like a strange mystery. Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was an English philosopher and statesman who served as Attorney General and Lord Chancellor of England under King James I. Some quotes by Francis Bacon. "Knowledge is power. In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Silence is the sleep that nourishes wisdom. The job of the artist is always to deepen the mystery. There is no comparison between that which is lost by not succeeding and that which is lost by not trying. Imagination was given to man to compensate him for what he is not, and a sense of humor to console him for what he is. Money is like manure, of very little use except to be spread." What an amazing man Francis Bacon was. On this thing we call life, much light he did shed. Henry Ford. Henry Ford was an American industrialist and business magnate. He was He was the founder of the Ford Motor Company and the chief developer of the mass assembly line technique of mass production. Henry Ford created the first automobile that middle-class Americans could afford. Ford's 1908 introduction of the Model T automobile revolutionized transportation and American industry. Henry Ford became one of the richest and best-known people in the world. He paid high wages to his workers so they could afford to buy automobiles from the Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford also was a pioneer in reducing the work week from 6 days to 5 days, creating the 2-day weekend. He had an intense commitment to lowering the cost of production so he could reduce the cost of producing automobiles so he could reduce the price of automobiles. In 1914, he astonished the world by offering a $5 per day wage, which more than doubled the rate of most of his workers. Henry Ford said, quote, There is joy in work. There is no happiness except in the realization that we have accomplished something. He also said, Quality means doing it right when no one else is looking. Mencius. Mencius was a Chinese philosopher who has often been described as the second sage, that is, second to Confucius himself. Mencius inherited Confucius' ideology and developed it further. He lived from 372 BC to 289 BC. Mencius spent much of his life traveling around China, offering counsel to different rulers. One primary principle of his work is that human nature is righteous and humane. A state with righteous and human policies will flourish by nature. Some quotes by Mencius. The great man is he who does not lose his child's heart. Friends are the siblings God never gave us. Sincerity is the way to heaven. If Confucius wasn't born, the long night would have no bright light. The disease of men is that they neglect their own fields and go to weed the fields of others. Try your best to treat others as you wish to be treated yourself, and you will find that this is the shortest distance to benevolence. The feeling of right or wrong is the beginning of wisdom. The feeling of compassion is the beginning of humanity. Zoroaster. Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra, is regarded as the spiritual founder of Zoroastrianism. He lived before 600 BC, likely 1500 to 100 BC. Zoroaster was an Iranian prophet who challenged the existing traditions of ancient Iranian religion. He founded the first monotheistic religion in the world and influenced the ancient Greek philosophers, as well as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zoroastrianism became the official state religion of ancient Iran, particularly during the era of the Achaemenid Empire. The religion declined after the Arab Muslim conquest of Iran. Some quotes by Zoroaster. Doing good to others is not a duty, it is a joy, for it increases your own health and happiness. Happiness comes to them who bring happiness to others. Do not hold grain waiting for higher prices when people are hungry. Ability in a man is knowledge which emanates from divine light. Do not lose joy in life as you grow old in years. Let not your joie de vivre be crushed under the weight of years. Zoroaster is inspiring. He removes all of our fears. Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I was Queen of England and Ireland from 1558 until her death in 1603. Elizabeth was the last monarch of the House of Tudor and is sometimes referred to as the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth was the only surviving daughter of King Henry VIII by Anne Boleyn, his second wife, who was executed when Elizabeth was 2 years old. Elizabeth became queen in 1558. She established an English Protestant church which evolved into the Church of England. One of Elizabeth's mottos was, "I see and keep silent." Her reign became known as the Elizabethan era. The period is famous for the flourishing of English drama, led by playwrights such as William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, the prowess of English maritime adventurers such as Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh, and for the defeat of the Spanish Armada. In the Kingdom of England, Elizabeth provided a welcome stability, and helped to forge a sense of national identity. Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev was a Soviet and Russian politician who served as the eighth and final leader of the Soviet Union from 1985 to the country's dissolution in 1991. Gorbachev was born in Privolnoye, Russia, Soviet Union, to a poor peasant family of Russian and Ukrainian ancestry. Growing up under the rule of Joseph Stalin, he operated combine harvesters on a collective farm. Mikhail Gorbachev married Raisa Titarenko in 1953 and received his law degree in 1955. After Joseph Stalin's death in 1955, he became a proponent of the de-Stalinization reform efforts of Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. In 1985, Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union. He was committed to reform. Gorbachev withdrew Soviet troops from Afghanistan. His policies of glasnost and perestroika allowed for more freedom of speech in the press and decentralization of economic decision-making. Gorbachev played a major role in ending the Cold War and in the reunification of Germany. His policies led to the end of communism in Eastern Europe and in Russia. He received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990. What a life Mikhail Gorbachev lived. His contribution was certainly not tiny. Menes. Menes was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who united Upper and Lower Egypt and was the founder of the first dynasty. He lived around 3200 BC to 3000 BC. Menes is considered the first human pharaoh of Egypt, directly inheriting the throne from the god Horus. He is seen as similar to Romulus in ancient Rome. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus claimed that Menes founded the city of Memphis as his capital, after diverting the course of the Nile River through the construction of a levee. Pliny credited Menes with being the inventor of writing in Egypt. In one story, Menes was attacked by his own dogs while hunting. He fled across a lake on the back of a crocodile, and in thanks founded the city of Crocodilopolis. In another story, Menes' death came when he was killed by hippopotamus. In 1774, Alexander Dow, a Scottish Orientalist and playwright, wrote the tragedy Cithona, set in ancient Egypt. The lead character was Menes, and the drama was played at the Theatre Royal in London on Drury Lane. Wow, Menes was an interesting fellow. That is certainly plain. Charlemagne. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was a member of the Carolingian dynasty and became king of the Franks, king of the Lombards, and emperor of the Romans. Charlemagne united most of Western and Central Europe. He lived from 747 to 814 A.D. He was the first emperor of Western Europe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire 300 years earlier. Charlemagne founded the Carolingian Empire, an expanded Frankish state that is considered the first phase in the history of the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne was the eldest son of Pepin the Short and Bertrada of Laon. He reached the height of his power in 800 when he was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III on Christmas Day at Old St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Charlemagne has been called the father of Europe. His reign spurred the Carolingian Renaissance, a period of energetic cultural and intellectual activity. Charlemagne is a direct ancestor of many European royal families, including the Capetians, Ottonians, Luxembourg, Urea, and the Habsburg House. What a life Charlemagne lived! He was a lion of a man, the opposite of a mouse. Homer was a Greek poet, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, two epic poems that are foundational works of ancient Greek literature. He lived in the 8th century BC. Homer is considered one of the most revered and influential authors in history. Homer's Iliad centers on a quarrel between King Agamemnon of Mycenae and the warrior Achilles during the last year of the Trojan War. The Odyssey chronicles the 10-year journey of Odysseus, king of Ithaca, back to his home after the fall of Troy. Homer's poems foster the ideals of heroism, glory, and honor. The Homeric epics Epics from antiquity to the present day have inspired many famous works of literature, music, art, and film. Some quotes by Homer. Be still, my heart, thou hast known worse than this. There is nothing nobler or more admirable than when two people who see eye to eye keep house as man and wife, confounding their enemies and delighting their friends. What a contribution Homer made. For his own bad karma, he certainly made amends. Justinian I. Justinian I, also known as Justinian the Great, was the Eastern Roman emperor from 527 to 565 AD. During his reign, there was a partial restoration of the territories of the defunct Western Roman Empire. His general Belisarius conquered the Vandal kingdom in North Africa. Belisarius, Narses, and other generals conquered the Ostrogothic kingdom, restoring Dalmatia, Sicily, Italy, and Rome to the empire after more than a half-century of rule by the Ostrogoths. His legacy also includes the rewriting of Roman law, the blossoming of Byzantine culture, and the construction of the Hagia Sophia, which was an Eastern Orthodox Christian church until 1453, when it became a Muslim mosque. In Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, Justinian I is featured as a spirit who resides in heaven for his defense of Christianity and his restoration of Rome to the empire. Wow! Justinian I really worked hard. He must have been very satisfied with his life's work when he was able to retire. Mahavira. Mahavira was the 24th supreme leader of Jainism. He lived in the 6th century BC. He was born into a royal Kshatriya Jain family in ancient India. Mahavira abandoned all worldly possessions at the age of 30 and left home in pursuit of spiritual awakening, becoming an ascetic, and practiced intense meditation and severe austerities for 12 and a half years, attaining omniscience and liberation. He preached for 30 years. Mahavira taught that observance of the vows of ahimsa or nonviolence, satya or truth, asteya or non-stealing, brahmacharya chastity, and aparigraha non-attachment are necessary for spiritual liberation. Some quotes by Mahavira. Anger begets more anger, and forgiveness and love lead to more forgiveness and love. Live and allow others to live. Hurt no one. Life is dear to all living beings. Eating constitutes the greatest obstacle to self-control. It gives rise to indolence. All are my friends. I have no enemies. What a wonderful life Mahavira lived. Our wonderful Heavenly Father, he certainly did please. Well, that concludes today's presentation. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.